we should mention, of course, Minnesota won that district due to the unfortunate passing of Jim Hagedorn. That seat is open. And once again, because of the timeline here, they were able to get a special election into the Minnesota 1 district. We're going to have the special election first, and then there's going to be a general election coming up here in November as well. Running for the special election right now is Richard Painter, of course, the former Republican, now a Democrat, ran for the U.S. Senate seat. He's now running for the Minnesota 1 in the special election down there. He's kind enough to join us today to talk about his campaign. Richard, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show.
My absolute pleasure. The last time I think we checked in with you, we had you on the air back in 2018 when you were going to run for the Senate seat. What have you been up to in the years since between that Senate race and this House race?
I've been teaching at the University of Minnesota Law School, enjoying my students and writing on reform of the banking sector and also reform of the political system and the Department of Justice and the executive branch and ethics in the government. So I've spent quite a bit of time working on issues I believe are important to voters, and it's time to get back in the fray and fight for the people.
You have a long history with politics. Was it one of those things where, I mean, and teaching at the U is fun, it's good, it's a good job, it's a good gig, but at the same time, was that always that pull there? Do you want to get back into politics at some point here?
Well, absolutely. I want to do what I can to make the world a better place and to stand up for people who all too often are pushed around by big corporations, by special interests, and I'm really talking about 99% of the people in the district there in the First Congressional District, people who want to pay to feed their families and put gas in the tank, and it's a situation where special interests control Congress, and we need somebody there to fight for ordinary people.
Talk a little bit about Minnesota 1. What about the Minnesota 1 race with the special election here? What appealed to you about getting back into the fray at this point?
I believe we can flip large parts of rural America from red to blue. And one of the messages that I'm making clear to people in the First Congressional District is that with climate change, we are going to have some devastating droughts and flooding for farmers. The government, federal government needs to set aside money to help for disaster relief, but also move toward clean energy. And that's going to include wind turbines in our rural areas, including in southern Minnesota. We can bring in electricity through from the rural areas of this country from much of the urban areas, and we can do so with clean energy. All we need is investment by the federal government. This is now critically important, not only for saving the planet, but for our national security. We cannot be dependent on Vladimir Putin or on the Saudi Arabians and other dictators for fossil fuels that are also destroying our planet. So I believe rural America is ready for Democrats, ready for a progressive agenda, and that's what we're going to do with the First Congressional District.
It's one of the things that you brought that up about the floods and the droughts and the going back and forth. It was interesting about 15 years ago when California was starting to go through that. People were saying, well, this is going to go everywhere. And in Minnesota, we had a massive drought last year. And then what? In the last 3 storms we've had, we've made up all the rain. And right now it doesn't look like it's going to stop. We're in this pattern. We cannot sustain an agricultural sector if we are constantly having to deal with drought followed by floods, followed by drought, followed by floods.
You're absolutely right. Farmers depend on the weather for a living. A farmer who votes for a climate change denier is like a chicken voting for Colonel Sanders. Makes absolutely no sense. And we have an ecological disaster in rural America unparalleled since the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. And I believe the same thing is going to happen as happened in the 1930s when farmers in droves abandoned the Republican Party for the Democrats because the Republicans did absolutely nothing for them. And FDR cared about rural America. And I care about rural America, and I believe a large number of those counties that have been voting Republican will vote Democratic in this special election, and we can bring this movement to the rest of the country.
I love your idea as well. I mean, if you travel down, I went out to Mount Rushmore a few years back, and you get down to the southwestern part of the state. And once again, we should mention, you're under the old The old boundaries for this special election will be immediately followed by an election under the new boundaries after the post-census on this. But you are a little bit more to the west. There's a lot of windmills out there. That is something. Go through Indiana. You go through, Tennessee. You go through Illinois. There's lots of areas where the people are taking advantage of the fact that we have this open area. Let's build some windmills, and it seems to be a fairly efficient way to generate very clean energy.
It's an extremely efficient way to generate clean energy. And in the 1920s and 30s, rural electrification was about bringing electricity from the cities out to the rural areas. Well, we're now going to do it the other way around. We're going to generate electricity in rural America and bring it to the cities, and we can energize the economy in rural America as well. And this should be of interest to everybody in the 1st Congressional District who cares about saving our planet and also about economic growth. We can do both. We just need someone in there, in the House of Representatives, fighting for ordinary Americans. And that's what I hope the voters of the 1st Congressional District are going to focus on when they pick up their ballot and go vote in that primary.
Richard Painter joining us. He is running in the special election to fill the seat that was held by Jim Hagedorn. He is running down in the Minnesota 1 district. Let's talk farmers a little bit more here. I was reading some interesting articles that talked about this year, actually, the margins for farmers grew. And a lot of that, thank you, Joe Biden, had to deal with the fact that they were able to get fuel and seed and fertilizer in an early cost. And so they were benefiting, even though the markets and inflation was there, on the older prices. They're going to have a problem, though. When you look at the farming as it's going to be coming through in 2022, 2023, we're going to need to address the fact that the inflation is going to have a larger bite of the farmers' margins. Talk a little bit about what you would like to do to try to help out the farming sector on that front.
We need to enforce the antitrust laws in this country. And what's happening for farmers is they are hit with a monopoly power of big corporations for their input as well as when they sell their produce. So when farmers buy fertilizer, they are dealing with monopoly power. John Deere sells farmers equipment, and then to repair the equipment, it costs a fortune. And John Deere has been very severely criticized, and there's currently litigation pending under the antitrust laws. And then on the out, when farmers sell their produce, all too often they're dealing with monopolies. I've been talking about the pork monopoly, the big pork companies, including Hormel down in Austin, that have been sued under the antitrust laws with respect to price fixing. And the farmer pays, farmer gets very little for their produce, and then the big meat companies and the grain companies turn around and use the same monopoly power to fix prices at the grocery store. And this is just plain wrong. Farmers and consumers are in the same boat and are getting squeezed by the monopoly power of big business.
I want to focus as well. You are looking to represent Minnesota 1, which of course is the location of the Mayo Clinic, the best hospital, just rated best hospital on the planet. Healthcare is a big issue in Rochester as well for everyone, especially as we're on the hopefully on the tail end of this pandemic. Talk a little bit about that, what you can bring to the table for the healthcare sector as well as the Mayo Clinic down there.
Well, I believe it's critically important that we have affordable health care, and that means moving toward a single-payer system. That doesn't mean we take everybody immediately off their private insurance, but we need to move toward a single-payer system and have single-payer health care available as a choice for every American. We also need to expand rural health care. The Mayo Clinic is a fabulous facility. We need to make sure that the quality of care available at the Mayo Clinic is available throughout the United States, including elsewhere in the 1st Congressional District. You should not have to travel to Rochester to get top quality health care. So affordability of health care, an efficient system of insurance. I believe that single-payer insurance would be a lot more efficient than horsing around with all these insurance companies taking a huge cut. And then making sure that healthcare is available everywhere geographically. And there's an enormous amount we can do with healthcare, telehealthcare, and over the computers, where doctors in Rochester could be talking to patients all over America. There's a lot we can do with technology here. So I say it's time for investments in healthcare. Let's cut out the insurance companies. All they do is push the paper around and keep us on hold on the phone all the time. Let's cut them out of the action and get the money to the doctors, the nurses, the healthcare professionals, so we can provide healthcare for everybody.
You brought up I think one of the things this pandemic exposed is that after years of cost-cutting measures, medical companies realize that the idea of not having fully funded, fully staffed, fully prepared medical facilities in rural America, away from the Twin Cities, away from the Mayo Clinic, that's a major problem there. Is that something that the federal government should – I mean, obviously we talk about single-payer system. That's obviously getting involved there. Are we looking at a need for the federal government to get involved to get those rural hospitals back up to the standards where they can handle the community that they are in?
Absolutely. That's an investment we need to make, and that's going to include technological investments so that even if the doctor is not there in that hospital, the doctor can communicate with a specialist, can communicate with doctors in the hospital through telemedicine and sending images back and forth. There's a lot we can do technologically in rural hospitals that we could not do 20 or so years ago, but we need to invest. And that type of investment by the government is going to pay off dramatically for patients, for the healthcare sector, for doctors. We're going to be able to create jobs. This is a win-win possibility, and it's critically important that healthcare not just be a luxury that is enjoyed in the big cities, but it is accessible to every American, and rural America needs high-quality healthcare.
Minnesota won for a long time. It's Governor Walz's seat. I mean, that's his seat down there. He'd been DFL for a long time, and he was a great DFLer down there and popular. He was well liked in that district, and yet we've now had we've had Republican leadership down there. The Republicans that are out there right now that want to take that seat, I mean, they are scary to say the least here. This is a seat. I don't think the Minnesota 1st District is one of these far-right extremist Idaho-like districts that is out of reach for the DFL. I think this is a very winnable seat for the DFL.
This is a winnable seat, but to win this seat, the DFL needs to run a candidate who cares about ordinary people. This is not a seat to run a corporate Democrat, and this has been my criticism of Jeff Ettinger, the former CEO of Hormel, who was named in one of those price-fixing suits. I am very dead serious here. There are other good candidates. People don't want to vote for me, but it's critically important that voters in the 1st Congressional District on the DFL ticket pick someone who can represent ordinary people, not someone who's been in the business of selling pork at exorbitant prices for decades. We need ordinary people to be represented in this Congress. We are sick and tired of elections being bought and sold, and that goes for the Republicans, and that can sometimes go for the Democrats. And so it's time to find somebody to stand up for the people in Congress and push along an agenda that's going to help everybody.
It is a big district. I'm not going to lie there. You're going to have to do a lot of driving. So I imagine right now, if people are interested, they can find out more about you and make a donation, volunteer for your campaign. If they head to your website, what is your website right now?
It's painterforcongress.com.
Painter for Congress, is it .com or .org?
.org.
Painterforcongress.org, painterforcongress.org. It does present, I mean, is there a little concern? I mean, obviously, we got the special election, then immediately, say you are the winner. Then immediately you got to turn around and run a general election campaign, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a little intimidating. I mean, you getting back into politics again, that's a lot of politics in 1 year.
That is a lot of politics in 1 year. We'll see who the Republicans come up with. They've got one insurrectionist, then they got someone else whose best friend is still in the clink there for pedophilia. So they've got to come up with a candidate who's halfway decent. Let's hope they do, because it'd be nice to have two at least decent political parties in this country. But unfortunately, we're not there right now.
I will agree with you wholeheartedly on that statement. Richard Painter, running in the special election for the Minnesota 1 race. Once again, if you'd like more information about his campaign, find out where he stands on the issues, or if you'd like to volunteer or donate to his campaign, painterforcongress.org, painterforcongress.org. Richard, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being Democrat of the Day today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the show.